Hello, this is your host, Liz Lawless for Wild West Diversity, and this is episode 73. So, can't believe we've got 73 episodes. And today we're going to be talking about our Cleo Hearn Day celebration that we had yesterday. February 28th was designed for proclamation last year. And so, here on Wild West Diversity, we tell the stories, the rarely and untold stories about multicultural contributions. So we're excited today to be celebrating Cleo Hearn Day as designated by the Lancaster City Council. That's the town in Texas where Cleo has lived all these years, almost 40 years. And so last year they designated the day, and we decided that we didn't want that to just go away. Usually, somebody does a proclamation, and you get the form, the proclamation, and nothing else happens after that. But we decided that we wanted to keep something going. We wanted to thank the city of Lancaster for their nomination and making this proclamation, and so that's what we did. So last night we had a big old celebration. For that, we also kicked off the Cleo Hearn Scholarship Fund. So this is a new scholarship that we will offer in the coming fall to high school students who either want to go on to college, they may want to go to a trade school, they may want to become a professional cowboy or cowgirl, and they may want to join one of the professional associations like the PRCA. PRCA is Professional Rodeo Cowboy Association. And so basically, the scholarship would pay their entry fees or membership fees, or maybe for some of their tuition and stuff. So we hope to start with two students this year, and then just grow that over the next few years as we raise additional scholarship money. So that'll be exciting stuff. And so we had about 40 or 50 people last night. We had some of our sponsors. We had the mayor of Lancaster. We had the mayor deputy pro tem. They came out and thanked us for continuing this on. And they made the point, too, that a lot of times they do proclamations and they do that in chambers. And that's the only thing that happens. Nothing else happens besides just taking some pictures, some photo ops. So we're going to do that. We're going to keep that going. Hopefully next year we'll be able to add to it and maybe do a little parade through the downtown area, because Lancaster has a historic downtown, like a lot of small towns. Lancaster is actually a suburb of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, south of Dallas, and so it's a small community, and they were actually hit by a tornado, I guess about 10 or 12 years ago, and it destroyed part of their downtown. And so they've been rebuilding ever since, because, it's hard for small towns. They don't have the resources that bigger cities have. And so they've been gradually working their way back. And so we were in a great co-working space that has just been remodeled and rebuilt and refurbished. And so it was a nice time in the old town, as they say. So we had, like you say, sponsors there. We had family there. A lot of Cleo's family from Oklahoma and Texas were there. A lot of our team, our management team for the rodeo, were all there. Friends and family to support Cleo Hearn Day, the celebration that we're having for him now that he's retired. So this is all kind of legacy work that we're doing this past year as we've transitioned, from him retiring and his four boys taking over the rodeo. It's the Cowboys of Color Rodeo. You can go to cowboysofcolorrodeo.com and find out more about Cleo's story. You can see the pictures. Our photo gallery will be putting up new pictures from last night here later today and tomorrow over the next few days. We also have the rodeo schedule there. So that'll be coming up, and I'll kind of mention that toward the end of our hour here today. We were kind of hoping that maybe some of our folks would jump on. We did kind of send out a note and say, hey, we're going to be live today. If you can jump on, join us. But it looks like maybe that's not going to happen. But somebody might come in the middle of the live stream. So I'm just going to talk a little bit more about Cleo. If you haven't listened to some of our previous episodes, Mr. Hearn was one of the first 8 African Americans to serve in the Presidential Honor Guard under President Kennedy. He was also the first African American to go to school on a rodeo scholarship. He was the first African American to win a national championship. And I think maybe we have a photo when he did that. He got a car and a trailer. So there he is, like you say, when he won his championship there, Mr. Black Rodeo. And that's what the people began to call him. And he's known as Mr. Black Rodeo all over the world. We've had coverage from media all over the world, from the BBC to CNN to NBC with Dan Rather, and multiple local and stations have come out and covered him all over the state of Texas and Oklahoma and other places. So we've been very blessed in that. And so he did his first rodeo. All he really dreamed of being was a cowboy, a calf roper. He wanted to be the best calf roper, and he won in 1970 the National Calf Roping Championship at the Denver Western, which is one of the stock shows. It's held basically every February in Denver, Colorado, and that's where he won. And so it's a legacy that not very many people have. And so he really did. He was an ordinary guy that lived an extraordinary life because of his choices. Because he met a black cowboy when he was about 9. And that's all he wanted to be after that, was a cowboy. He loved horses. He found a ranch that was about 2 miles away from his house in Seminole, Oklahoma, where he was born. And he would walk to that ranch just so he could be around the horses. And he told those horses, one day we're going to be really good friends. And so we have a book. You can see the book behind me over here. Oh, no, wrong shoulder, over here. I'm facing the wrong way. That's Mr. Hearn, Cleo Hearn there on the horse in the yellow shirt. And so that's a children's book that we've done about his life. And that's available on Amazon and across retail platforms. So you can go check that out if you want to. But it's called Cleo Hearn, Mr. Black Rodeo, of course, because that's what he's known as. And he did his first rodeo in the early 70s. He took a bunch of black cowboys to Harlem, New York, because the people wanted him to do a rodeo. And he said, I don't produce rodeos. I'm a cowboy and I'm a calf roper. And they said, well, if it would change one kid's life, would you do it? And he thought about it all the way back home on the plane. And he got home and he said, hey, guys, they had a Black Rodeo Association that they had started. And he said, we need to go do this rodeo for these kids. So that's how it started. And then 1985, I think, we did the first annual rodeo for the African American Museum as a fundraiser. And that's how I got involved. I started my rodeo journey, my Cowboys of Color rodeo journey in 1992. So a few years later, I came along and was an agency for the African American Museum, the advertising agency, because I had an agency in Dallas for years. And they were one of my clients. And they said, well, we've got this rodeo fundraiser. Would you just sit in one night and take notes? Because the marketing media person had to go out of town. His dad had a health crisis, a heart attack. And so I said, sure, I'll sit in. And so I sit in, and that was 30 years ago. So I'm still here doing rodeos. And the reason I'm doing it is because they're such great stories. And these are stories that are rarely told. These are not stories that you're going to normally hear about in school or in academic places, institutions, because people don't know the stories. So that's why we're telling these stories. So that's why we have this live stream, Wild West Diversity. It's our educational arm, basically. We do in the off season. We don't really have an off season anymore, but we used to do rodeos in the summer, and then in the winter, we would speak to schools and corporations about Black cowboys and Black Western history and multicultural Western history, Spanish history, as well as Native American and women stories, because a lot of those stories didn't get told. And As I've said before here, the sad fact is a lot of people get their history from movies, and that's fiction, not fact. Most of those movies and television shows, they're based on true stories, but they're not always accurately told. They do take some license sometimes with the characters, with the stories, with the actual facts of what happens. And so, that's why we're here. We're here to tell the true story, the true facts, to let people know about this collective heritage that we all have, that we all participated in, because all cultures participated in the settling of the American Wild West. The West was anything west of the Mississippi River. That was all territory after the Civil War. There were no states at that time. The states didn't come in until later years. And so it was open territory. Obviously, there were Indian, Native American tribes. Many of those tribes were farmers. They weren't all warrior tribes. Obviously, some of the tribes were warrior tribes, but a lot of those tribes were not. They were agricultural. And we learned from all of those people. Those people moving west learned from the Native Americans about crops and about the weather and about the land and the environment. The Spanish came in and brought horses and cattle, and so learned about animal and about rodeo and basically roping skills and horsemanship skills. And as African Americans, they brought some of their own skills too, because they had worked with livestock on plantations and farms and ran in places in the East before the Civil War happened, and then they were freed. And they had done that in their own countries too. In Africa, they had dealt with livestock and animals in a number of different ways. So they had those skills, and they taught those skills to each other as they moved across the Western territory. So it's a very exciting story. It's a very cultural story. We say today, are you white? Are you Anglo? But in actuality, that's mostly European cultures. That's what that means. Like myself, I'm part Native American. My dad was Native American and English. His mother was Native American. His father was English. On my mother's side of the family, my grandfather was Swedish and my grandmother was Irish. So most of us are a mixed culture. Most of us have a mixed cultural background. And so basically, what somebody would consider white was, Swedish, Irish, Jewish, French, Italian, Scandinavian, from the different countries there as people came over. And what happened is after the Civil War, people came into Galveston Island. Before that, they came into New York. They came into Ellis Island and they registered there, and then they moved south or west or east from New York. But what happened after the Civil War is it opened up Galveston Island, and people came into Galveston Island to travel west, because when you traveled north, you had weather issues. For a large part of the year, it was too cold. There was, it was snowy. It was, and these were treacherous times anyway. There were no roads, there were no paved streets. This was just open land. And so people didn't want to go north, and they didn't want to do wagon trains across the north because there had been too many people had died taking those trails. And so they were looking for those southern routes. And an African American gentleman named James Beckwourth found the Southern Trail into California. And so, but never got any recognition for that until the 1980s, not 1880s. That's when he discovered it, but it was in the 1980s when they finally recognized him and named a park after him in the city and all. And so he finally got some recognition. They were supposed to pay him to do that when he found that, but of course he was African American, and so they didn't pay him, and he couldn't go to court because blacks weren't allowed to go to court or sue anybody. And so he never got the recognition that he deserved. But he's a great hero of the past, and that many people don't know about. So he was a fur trader and a trapper in his early days, and then he took people west from Arkansas and through Colorado and the northern Oklahoma and stuff. So those were exciting times. And so these people came into Galveston, they moved up the trail in different ways. They moved into New Mexico where there were already Native Americans and Spaniards because they did have missions that from Mexico that they established a series of missions across New Mexico and Arizona and what we know now is the Californias, those territories. And those are states now, but at the time they weren't. They were owned by different people. Mexico owned part of that land for a period of time, and even Texas flew under Six Flags. So that's why it's called Six Flags a lot of times. So we were under different rule at different times over our history. And so today it's America though, but it is still the American Wild West. And so all cultures participated, and we enjoy telling those stories. We want to tell those stories, and we hope that you'll support us. We hope that you'll go and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Wild West Diversity. You can just look that up and search for that, and you can even Google us, Wild West Diversity live stream, and that will come up as well. And so we hope that you'll go there and subscribe because we need to build our subscription list, and that way, then we can maybe go out and get additional sponsors to help support our educational programs and things like that, because we do donate books to the schools. We are donating a number of these books about Mr. Hearn. Our goal is to donate 10,000 of these books over the next year to schools and to disadvantaged youth and the working poor. Because one of the things we do know is that kids that are on the borderline of poverty, their folks may be working, but one of the things they don't have is new books. They can go to the library, and most of the time they have library cards and they can get books that way, but they don't have their own books. And so we are working with different organizations in the community that service people, the working poor, the homeless, people in disadvantaged areas, to donate these books so that youth have somebody to look up to, so that they have mentors. They can see somebody that looks like them and say, hey, if he did it or she did it, maybe I could do it too. And that's why we tell the stories, because we find out that we have more in common than we have differences when we start listening to each other's stories. So that's very important. It's very important to us that we tell these stories about these historical legends. And a lot of times you'll hear us talk about some of these historical people. And if you go back and listen to our previous episodes, you'll hear us talking about different people like Johanna July, who trained horses for the military, maybe Kathy Williams, who was the only documented female buffalo soldier. You're going to hear about Bill Pickett, who invented bulldogging, or what we consider today steer wrestling. That's the only rodeo event that's put on that was created by a black man, basically. Nat Love was Dead-Eye Dick. He won a lot of the shooting contests. They used to have these rifle and shooting contests across the West and at different communities. And so he was a sharpshooter, and he won a lot of those contests. And so he's a little bit known. People know a little bit about him. Jesse Stahl, who was a bareback rider in Oklahoma, and they always got downgraded, a lot of these African American rodeo cowboys, because of the color of their skin, or they weren't allowed to rope. Mr. Hearn, behind me, when he started in '59, he wasn't allowed to rope always. When he would go to a competition, when he'd show up and they saw he was black, they wouldn't let him enter. So, but he just kept on, he did not let that dissuade him. He just kept going to rodeos, or sometimes they'd let you rodeo after the rodeo, but not in front of the arena and not in front of the attendees or the people that had paid to come to the rodeo. But he had better times, and they made the mistake of posting the times. And so the other cowboys, of course, knew the times, but then people in the audience began to see the times. And they said, why didn't we get to see that Cleo Hearn fella? Because he had the best time. If he's the best, why didn't we get to see him? And so the audience and the other cowboys begin to make the producers, the rodeo producers, allow him to ride and compete because he was so good. And he was just totally focused on being the best calf roper he could be. And even up into he roped up into 79. He's 84. He'll be 85 in May, 84 and a half. And he roped up until he was 79. So, if you love something and you do it every day, it comes easy to you after practicing day after day after day. And even at 83, he picked up a rope and threw it out there and hit a steel calf. We had a rope and dummy calf, and he threw the rope out there and caught it on the first try. And he hadn't roped in 3 years. But that's called muscle memory. After you've done something so many times, it's like if you play the piano or you play a musical instrument or anything that you do, work on cars, no matter what it is, if you do it over and over and over again, you get really good at it. You can't help but get excellent at it and to be very good. And so he was, and so we want to share his legacy. We want to continue that legacy. There were many times, I'm sure, over the years that I know about where he paid entry fees for cowboys and cowgirls that he thought had some skill and talent, and maybe they didn't have the money, the wherewithal, because it's not an inexpensive sport. You have to play. This is a sport where you pay to play. You have to pay an entry fee. You have to have a truck, a trailer, a horse if you're in some of the timed events like barrel racing or steer wrestling or calf roping. If you're doing bull riding or bareback or saddle bronc riding, you can just show up with your chaps and your gloves and your vest and stuff and your ropes, but you don't have to have a horse. So a lot of kids start that way. A lot of people start that way because it doesn't cost them as much. And you can ride up and down the road. You can get 4 or 5 of your buddies in a truck or a car, and you can travel to a rodeo. And if you win some money, you go on down to the next rodeo. Or if you don't win any money, you go on down the road to the next rodeo. So it's a lifestyle, and it's a challenging lifestyle, and it's not for everybody. But once you get bit by the bug, the rodeo bug, yeah, we've got guys like you say, just like Cleo, that are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they started rodeoing in high school and college, or maybe in the military. Some of our guys were in the military, and the military used to have rodeos, and so that's how a lot of those guys started. And the same thing, they roped up into their 50s or 60s or 70s because they don't, the bareback riders and the bull riders don't usually last that long. It's a tougher sport, and it's much harder on your body. And so those guys usually, participate into their 30s and 40s. But as a calf roper and a barrel racer, you can race. We've had ladies that barrel raced up into their 60s and 70s. So it's a fun sport. It's family entertainment. The history is a part of American history, and it is a multicultural history. It's a collective history that we all share together. And so I appreciate y'all listening. I appreciate y'all watching. I hope that you'll tell your friends about Wild West Diversity, and that you'll tell them that there is a place where they can hear these stories about these ordinary people who lived extraordinary lives because of their choices and their actions and the actions that they took. And so they're great role models. They're great role models for kids, for sure. And they're really great role models for adults. If you have a dream or you have something you've always wanted to do, and you've let other people or circumstances or situations hold you back, well, we're here to tell you to follow that dream, because what we know is at the end of life, the regrets people have are about the things they didn't do. They're not about the things they did, except maybe if they worked too much and didn't spend time with their family, or maybe they weren't as kind as they could have been. Yeah, they have those kind of regrets, but the biggest regret that documented regret that people have is they did not live the life they wanted to live. They let somebody else make their choices for them. And so, if you've got a dream, whether that's a Western dream or another kind of dream, we encourage you to go after that. But if you especially have a Western dream, we want you to know that these jobs still exist today. You can still farm, you can still ranch, you can still be a veterinarian, you can be around horses, you can train horses, you can work with horses or cattle or animals or steers. If you like the land, you want to be on the land, you want to be outdoors and not in an office or in an apartment or on your computer all the time. You could be a park ranger, you can be a game warden, there you can be a historian, you can work at the parks all across the United States, especially and here in Texas, we actually have forts. So you can go out and volunteer or work at some one of these forts. A couple of them still exist that got preserved. A lot of them are just the foundations, but many of the Buffalo Soldiers served at these forts across Texas and Oklahoma and Colorado and Arkansas and places in Kansas. So, and even up into the Rockies, we actually even had Buffalo Soldiers on bikes in the Grand Canyon. So those historic photos are available. You can kind of look those stories up in different places, especially the Smithsonian and other places. But and you can find those stories here at Wild West Diversity. So we encourage you to be invested in your history and your family history. If you don't know anything about your family history or you don't know much about your family history, we would encourage you to go talk to the oldest person in your family. Maybe at Christmas, 4th of July, maybe it's coming up. Maybe your family gets together during the holidays or birthdays or weddings or funerals. Go and talk to somebody, the oldest person there, and ask them to tell you the stories that they heard from their grandparents. Okay, because that takes it back generations, not just their parents, but their grandparents or their great grandparents. What stories did they tell? And I bet you'll find out something really interesting and exciting about your family or somebody in your family that you didn't know before. So then we would encourage you to share those stories with other people, because it's through the sharing of our stories that we become more connected. So I thank you for watching Wild West Diversity. I thank you for supporting us over these 73 episodes. Next week, we're going to be talking with Garrett Scouten. Let me be sure I got that right. He basically is from Holland. His heritage is grandparents, great grandparents were from Holland, and they were dairy farmers. And so we're going to be talking to him about farm credit, the Ag Trust Farm Credit. They basically give loans to farms and ranches and recreational property. So if you're thinking about buying a property and getting out in the country somewhere, you want to come listen next week and hear Garrett as he describes and gives you the process and the steps that you need to take if you're interested in buying a farm or a ranch or a recreational property. Like maybe you want to, have some cows. Maybe you want to just do bird watching. Maybe you want a hunting lease or a fishing lease or something like that. You just want to go out and hunt and fish with your friends or your family. You can do that too. So, but buying a farm or a ranch or a land is different than buying other property, whether that's a house or a commercial building. So you need to know the ins and outs of it, and you need to work with somebody that really understands that part of the business, because it is a unique and specialized area of real estate. And so we would encourage you to come back next week for that. This has been your host, Liz Lawless, for episode 73, Cleo Hearn Day celebration. And we kicked off her scholarship last night. So thank you so much for watching. We're here every Thursday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. And you can see us here on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. And then you can maybe listen to us on our podcast channel after that. So if you have a favorite podcast channel, go look us up at Wild West Diversity and hear some of these great stories and these interviews with fascinating people. Thanks so much. We'll see you on the trail.